What is the first quarter moon that occurred on Friday? Why does the moon even have phases? And why is this particular phase of the moon so interesting to look
But
at?
look at the moon that we're looking at right now, a couple of days after the first quarter moon. It's a gibbous moon, and if you ask most people what is that phase called, they don't know. It comes from an Old English word meaning
Full moon.
protruding. But a gibbous moon can be anything from slightly fatter than half to
Mm.
virtually full, just a little bit off out of round. The bottom of the picture, you see tons of craters.
Yeah.
Yet within those dark blotches, the mare, there are almost none. And so this is telling you about the history of the moon. Obviously, meteor impacts must have been pretty random in hitting the moon. So if you have a lot on the bottom and you have none in the dark areas, that could not have been a random occurrence. So this tells us that something must have covered up the craters that were once there near the middle
Yeah.
or just above the middle of the moon. And those were lava seas spreading and drowning them out. Now, there
Mm.
are a few craters, rare, but there's a few within those lava seas, within
Mm.
those dark blotches, and that tells us those are the youngest features on the entire moon. In other words, without being
Yeah.
an expert, without being an astronaut, without having to go there at all, just by using the Slooh telescope tonight and looking at the moon, we can figure out the moon's history, its storyline.
What's interesting is that the moon was also one of the first objects to be really understood by humans as a species. We don't actually know when mankind first figured out why their nightly neighbor changed shape the way that it did, but we do know that by the time Ptolemy, the ancient astronomer, wrote down his observations, humans already understood the moon's orbit and what caused the different phases. We know scientifically that the moon directly affects the pull of ocean tides, but some pagan practitioners take it a step further. They believe that the moon actually has an effect on the metaphysical world as well as the physical. The cyclical nature of the moon from each phase onward in an endless cycle, those changes are also represent to some the circle of life, death, and rebirth. It's an essential principle of many pagan faiths.
Notice there's several pockmarked craters that have landed within the smooth um,
Yeah.
mare here, which shows that
Yeah.
these are new craters. One more thing we could do is compare those new craters with the craters at the bottom, which are the ancient, almost 4.5 billion-year-old craters, to see if there's any difference, because that would tell us if there's any weathering on the moon. Certainly on
Mm.
Earth, if you looked at a feature that was 4 billion years old and compared that to a modern geological feature, there'd be no comparison, namely because there wouldn't even be any features from 4 billion years ago. They would have all been erased by wind and water and erosion. And the fact that the craters that are new, that just as observers we can tell are new because they're on top of the lava, look no different from the craters at the bottom, tell us that nothing changes on the moon. Therefore, there can't be wind and water and erosion and rain. And so look at all we have learned just from this Slooh telescope view. We have
Yeah.
just
Just
recounted the storyline on the moon just by looking at it.